People are always pranking me this way. So Mike Hart is from Timber Lake, South Dakota, and is an associate professor emeritus of political science, along with, who else is in political science here? Yeah, Tim Shorn, okay. Yeah, he got his PhD from the Ohio State University. He's been here since 1992, and in 2002 joined the Political Science and Public Administration faculty with Matt Fairholm. No, not here, okay. Mike is married, as you all know, probably, to Karen Card, who also recently retired from USD. Mike has authored a ton of stuff, which I'm not going to list because I want to save time for him to talk, but we also hear him regularly on NPR, on the Political Junkies segment, and the In the Moment program. And he's, it's always, sometimes I hear it by accident, it's always great. So anyway, Mike, welcome to Rotary. Yeah.
Without a doubt, I speak by accident too, so. Well, we'll go with this one. Maybe. I have on the tables a 4-page outline. I'm not going to go through all of it. I wanted to list what I thought were significant pieces of legislation, which is what the evil Dr. Shorn wanted me to talk about today, from laws that went into effect on July 1st. And perhaps we'll wait for the computer to get to us.
Is the title Evil Doctor part of Tim Shorn's official work title?
It's an unofficial title,
Oh, it is unofficial.
but well earned. And yes, the attendance is due to me being the speaker today, Rand. So that's all it works. So what I thought I would do is talk about what I consider to be important pieces of legislation. There are somewhere between 500 and 600 bills introduced every year. The first year of a legislative term tends to have fewer bills introduced because junior legislators tend to want to get a feel for things and may not be known well enough to their constituencies, and so they tend to introduce fewer bills. Of those, there's probably 255 that are signed into law, and I gave you the Uniform Resource Locator. That's what URL stands for, in case you want to look these up and to see all of the bills that Governor Noem signed into law this year. Now, I also start out with one that wasn't signed into law, and that was Initiated Measure 28, the Medicaid expansion. Hotly contested, much like Ohio. There was an attempt by the legislature to move the date up to a primary election where fewer people show up to vote. And much like Ohio's vote yesterday, the people, once given the right to share power with the legislature, did not want a 60% minimum vote for the citizenry to be able to enact laws or constitutional amendments in the case of Ohio. So Medicaid expansion largely deals with putting 52,000 new people, was the estimate. As it turns out, those who have signed up in the first 6 weeks are much smaller than that. The number is only about 1,400 or so. And what is likely to occur is there will be a significant amount of money available for one-time appropriation next year. The plan was for 52,000. That hasn't been borne out yet. That's about the same number as those who, I don't know the right term, termed out at the end of the pandemic when we were no longer considered to be in a pandemic. So I don't know what more to say about that other than it was significant because it enables people who were any adult earning roughly $18,000. That's about the bottom fifth of the state's population. or 138% of the poverty level to be able to get a Medicaid covering their health care costs. The second one up there, see, I should just look right here. This is, it takes a year and you forget everything about teaching. Senate Bill 210 is the appropriations bill, and Chris could probably speak more about this, but I just wanted to highlight a couple things about the appropriations bill. The language here I put up specifically to remind us that the appropriations bill does not require a 2/3 majority, unlike all other appropriations bills. It's a 50%. It can be vetoed and has been in the past by Governor Bulow in the 1920s because this is sort of the irony, perhaps. The Democratic governor vetoed the Republican-passed spending bill because they were spending money to gleefully, I believe was the term he used. But a special session was called before July 1st and a budget was in place. In terms of the appropriations bill, it contains a couple important features for us. It essentially provides the funds for a tuition freeze for South Dakota Board of Regents institutions and technical colleges. And one important facet dealing with that is approximately 30 to 40% of out-of-state students, depending upon which school they go to, end up staying in the state where they went to school. State aid to education had considerable increases. Damon can tell us more about that, I'm sure, but it was a healthy increase, if not one of the largest in our state's history, both percentage-wise and dollar-wise. It didn't affect me this time, state employee salary increases. There were a couple other features that were attempted, but paid family leave was also provided for state employees through, maybe not specifically through the budget bill, but through authorization of the governor and her plans to strengthen families. Perhaps the one that got the most coverage late in the session was the reduction in the general sales tax from 4.5% to 4.2%. There is a sunset clause, meaning that come 2027, it will return to 4.5% for the statewide sales tax. There are probably going to be efforts either to sunset it earlier, and some will make efforts to get it later. And so we will watch the political discussions that try to deal with that. The criticism, and there are some, as well as the benefits of having an overall tax decrease, is for those spending $100, it'll amount to about a 30 cent decrease in taxes paid. But it's still a relatively large overall tax decrease for the citizens of the state of South Dakota. Eliminating the sales tax on groceries was estimated to have saved taxpayers about $104 million, and reducing the tax on all sales and use taxes was about $124 million, was the number I remember. You can correct me on this, but that was what I heard. There is currently underway a petition drive to put on the ballot that would remove the sales tax from food. It also, to me, shows that bill drafting is a very important thing, and the language that you use in writing laws, because the words matter, to quote Matt Michaels, and the language has to the effect of saying anything consumed. And that is a fairly broad term because it might involve cigarettes, it might involve, when my children were eating dirt, that might have been taxable had I bought the dirt. But that has provided consternation amongst quite a few people, because anything consumed is a very broad term, It's certainly not defined anywhere else in statute, so that'll require further legislation should it pass. And it may also put at risk our sales tax compact, because it wouldn't match what other states have, and it may put the tobacco settlement at risk. And so those are considerations that I'm sure we will hear more about as the election gets closer. Attorney General Jack Lee noted that if this is taken literally, it might affect $20 million from the tobacco settlement, and without knowing what it means, it'll have to be interpreted so that we know what actually is taxed and what isn't. It also led Governor Noem to withdraw her support for the sales tax on food through this mechanism. Let's see. More controversial, let's see which one, is House Bill 1080, which either bans gender-affirming care or passes the Help Not Harm bill, depending upon one's persuasions. It basically bans healthcare professionals from providing puberty blockers, hormone therapy, easy for me to say, and surgery to minors for treatment for gender dysphoria. This is up in the air due to a number of federal court decisions, as well as to the study by the American Pediatric Association. I don't think I have that right, but they're examining this, and a number of other countries that have determined not to provide these as lawfully administered treatments. It's going to be a challenge because it fits both with culture, with religious beliefs, and with individuals with a diagnosed disorder called gender dysphoria. So I think that will probably return in some format, whether it gets a majority to repeal that law, I don't know, but I'm sure that there will be efforts to do so. It is interesting that there are no lawsuits in South Dakota, as there have been in other states, to repeal this particular law, to my understanding. But I spend enough time reading newspapers to try to figure out what's going on. I don't follow the federal court dockets. Number 5 is also one. Well, that's gender affirming care. See, this is the problem of putting two documents together. The number 6 on the sheet in front of you and on the screen is what I consider to be a very large and significant change in our laws, and that is under the label of truth in sentencing. It's a requirement that for a number of crimes, the complete sentence must be served, as opposed to the method of what I would say is trying to reduce recidivism and make people, or create conditions for people to learn social skills, work habits, and the like, to return to society in a more productive manner. This has also been considered a challenge to the prison system, that we are enlarging our prison system. There will be more people serving larger portions of their system. My own history, when I finished my degree, I traveled from Columbus, Ohio down to Oxford, Ohio to teach at Miami University, and I drove past 2 3,000-bed supermax prisons that had been completed 5 years previous, that were completely full, and advising graduate students to teach classes in those and finding out what the conditions were like, but they filled it. And I think that's a concern for our local jail, is if we add more beds, are we going to try to pay the bills by filling it? But again, that's a concern. But if we look at the statewide level, the issue that we have is one of a real change in policy, and it will be a new change in policy for the Department of Corrections. At the end of June, I was able to take another tour of the facility with the new leadership, and they're focusing much more on reducing recidivism and preparing people to re-enter society with a number of job-related skills, and not just the skills that one can only practice in the prison setting. And everybody will have at least a GED if they are able to complete the coursework. Everyone will have a number of references about the quality of their work, and will at least have been exposed to what the workforce prepares them for. If we're requiring people to spend 85% of their sentence as opposed to earning early release time, will that make our prisons more dangerous? Because you don't earn good time to get out earlier on parole and probation. But again, those are just concerns. On the other hand, it provides more public safety, or at least has the potential of providing more public safety. And my view of South Dakota's political culture is we don't tolerate much deviance as opposed to many other areas of the country. So it seems that we're more willing to incarcerate people after having had presumptive probation, which we've ended. I have to look. It looks like election law. Election bills. Senate Bill 55 banned ranked choice voting. Basically, it's an instant runoff system. It is rather complicated. It would require more programming to determine, but essentially, if you think of there would be a number of boxes for us to fill in for our first choice, second choice, third choice, and fourth choice for each candidate. And if at the end of the first choice, no one has a majority, then the least vote getter would have been eliminated from further consideration. And then we'd go to the second choice, and then it becomes a cumulative vote, so that those receiving the most votes, first, second, third, fourth, if there are four candidates, the person who received the most votes would be declared the winner. We often see this in sports rankings, where how many first place votes did a team get, how many second place votes. That is in essence ranked choice voting. It's not as complicated as we make it out to be. It's just not what we're used to. That's Mike's view. There are others who believe that it is much more challenging. Senate Bill 160 created pre-election audits to test ballot tabulation algorithms and equipment, that they be locked, sealed, and unused between the testing certification and the election. It created post-election audits. In Section 3, there's a manual count in 5% of the county precincts, and one for statewide race, and one randomly selected other election contest, which may also be for manual counts to match or to see how closely they approximate the official count through the optical scanners. South Dakota's in a pretty good position that we're already using paper ballots. They just get scanned. Senate Bill 46 is going to enhance penalties for petition circulation perjury to a Class 6 felony. That is in terms of verifying or reasonably verifying the identity and voter registration status of the person signing the petition, and a Class 1 misdemeanor for falsely attesting verification. House Bill 1165 limited access to where and when absentee ballot drops can be placed, and noted that they must be attended by an election supervisor or a law enforcement officer. There were some allegations of ballot dumping in other states, none in South Dakota. You may also know or be aware that there were some 80,000 what have been perhaps pejoratively called RV voters, people who spent one night in South Dakota, registered to vote, were able to show that they'd spent one night in South Dakota, and you can register to vote, have your mail sent to a P.O. box somewhere in South Dakota, and it would be forwarded to you wherever you were. Well, as of July 1st, that doesn't exist at that level anymore. It requires a voter in state elections to be a resident for at least 30 days. Every person residing who maintains residence for 30 days and who has the other voter qualifications will actually be able to vote in municipal, primary, general, or school district elections. Senate Bill 140 deals with no party registration or leaving party registration blank. A new voter will be labeled as a no party registration. If any of us changes our address and then moves on and files a new registration card but leaves that blank, it will then turn to whatever we had previously registered to vote as. And I wanted to leave some time for questions. I know I didn't get through 10. I thought I might. So
does Senate Bill 46 basically make it a crime for the notary public who notarizes an affidavit that turns out to be false? Is that?
that's a misdemeanor. If you're the person collecting the signatures and you don't reasonably.
But the notary public is subject to a misdemeanor if they.
Like I didn't get ID or something, or I know a lot of these, so that's a good question.
I'd be reluctant to notarize anybody's anything.
Yeah, for a class 1 misdemeanor, that's a year and some money. So I think there will be much education on that before petitions are sent out and for notarizing those. The nameless person.
But not faceless. The 30 days to be a resident, is that consecutive? Is that within a year?
I don't remember. You now have the bill number and you have the link to the bills.
I'll just email you later.
Yeah, there are many different definitions of residency. Some for hunting permits, some for fishing, some for voting, there's a wide variety. I don't remember if it's consecutive days. That is a material omission, and I'm sorry for that.
Is South Dakota, I don't know if all states do this, where we have this post office box, or it has a physical address too, where you can claim this to be a South Dakota resident.
I think we're relatively unique in this.
Okay.
And there's a strong reason to do something like this for certain populations. We have a constitutional requirement that if you are in the armed forces and you spend a period of time outside the state of South Dakota but intend to come back, you are still a resident if you want to be a resident. And that's been in our Constitution since 1889. And so this might have been an offshoot of that, but I haven't looked to see when it was originally.
People I run into are people who have sold their home, wherever,
Yep.
I mean, traveling in a motorhome. That's their permanent residence.
Right. Well, it may not be their voting residence anymore.
So much of residency is a question of intent.
Yes. Do you intend? And then where is the burden of proof to show that you didn't intend, or that I would assume that would be what would be required for a prosecution, but I don't want to impersonate a lawyer. Well, this is dry as it can be, but I wanted to provide a list of new laws, and I'll do my best to answer questions, but I also wanted to provide the links so that you could search for other pieces of legislation of the 250-some bills that became law on July 1st. Thanks for your time.
Well, clearly it's impossible to summarize a year of our legislative activities in 25 minutes. So